Good evening, our audience. It is as though Israel is exempted from being held accountable, and as though it is taboo for the world to say that what Israel is doing in Gaza is genocide. Even the Jews are now being accused of being anti-Semites if they demand that Palestine be liberated. A global strike that was called for by activists from around the world. So how did Israelis and the world react to this call? When would the tears of the Gaza children prevail? So a new episode from the wars of the media. Here with us we have Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, the international relations expert. Welcome to you both, and we start by this global strike. Demands have been circling around, and before we see the reactions and the importance of this step, we have interviewed and we have prepared material because even the United States and the Jews in the United States have called for the strike.
I am putting out a call for mass non-violence. We hear the calls from Palestinian women who are demanding of us that this moment needs mass non-violence. We need to be blocking roads, boycotting, striking, shutting down arms factories. I say to every single person that's following me, if you are not going to take this call to action, unfollow me now.
Just doing my part to spread awareness. Hassan posted on her story urging everyone, and I mean everyone, to push for a strike on December 11th. The movement of life and the economic wheel in all countries must be paralyzed so that everyone feels that he is directly affected by the impact of aggression on Gaza, and so the pressure is being made to stop the war. All you have to do is stay home, do not shop, do not travel, do not buy gas, just strike. It's the easiest form of protesting.
Our colleague here is the demand of strike is interesting because it circulated around the world, and we hear such voices around the world. What is the significance of this step, and how can we practically know if this was a significant and effective step? It is true, today we are talking about the strike and how it was preceded by a huge promotion on social media, each by their own power and using the terms that they can influence others by. We saw that in the West and in the United States of America in specific, the focus is ever on the reacting with the activists in Gaza and using terms such as paralyzing the global economy and the production, in addition to raising the voices, where was the way that the activists responded. Today we are talking about a huge mobilization. We're also talking about a level of commitment that is significant, in addition to documentation of this commitment that we saw on social media. Specifically when we talk about the strikes that happened all around the world. And they come in refusal to and in opposition to the Israeli attack. This happened in two paths that we will talk about in this episode. First of all, the significance and the seriousness of this strike lies in the support for the Palestinian people, and second, in challenging the Israeli propaganda and the Western advertisement for Israel. In these posts, for example, we see guidance for the methodology of participating in the strike and urging all individuals and all people to not use their bank accounts, their electronic bank accounts even, in addition to avoiding using any meta platforms such as Instagram and Facebook that try to censor the Palestinian narrative, in addition to all activists responded to that. The focus was also on the protests and strikes that have now spread in all search engines. This is a specimen of the activists that tried to react to this wave. This activist from Japan is talking. And it is very significant to see that Japan is participating in this. Yes, we also see protests from people in all sectors, such as the health sector. We see the medical staff, the nurses, the doctors. All of them have joined the protests, in addition to people condemning the assault, people who went to their work is still condemned. This is because the medical service cannot be absolved, and it must be provided. some of the most interesting media material that show the significance and the danger and the threatening value of what's happening is that a lot of the protests that are pro-Palestine have been rising significantly. So more than half of these protests happened in the United States of America specific. And you can notice with me, according to this post, that the more Israel attacks Palestinians and kills Palestinians using American weapons, then the protests intensify and they become more frequent in the United States. And this is a graph that studies this increase in protests. We will also show you a group of videos that we collected from all around the world that showcase the level of commitment, which was significant. It was remarkable that any person can see if they surf the internet. People were committed to the strike in Lebanon, in Jordan, even in the 1948 occupied Palestinian lands. Jerusalem is another city, Mauritania, Egypt, New York, many American cities such as Chicago. We have also pictures and media material from Canadian cities, from Scotland, from Belgium. We're also talking here about differences and the ways that people participate in the strike. We can also see some movements on the official level, which happened in Lebanon as well. We even see Istanbul. We have a lot of material that were uploaded to the social media about Istanbul. We can see all the shops were all closed, and we also saw that some shops in the United States of America, specifically that the state decided to not commit, and stores that also did not commit the strike. We see that there are many people who protested before these shops and prevented anyone from entering them. These are very important pictures because the invite is very important, and we move on to you, Doctor. We see that the invite and the call circulates around the world under the slogan of "We will support Palestine," specifically Gaza, and condemnation to the Israeli assault and the genocide. In assessment, Doctor, how did you find the invite and the call, the mobilization, in addition to the methodology and manner of participation, and to what level are we scoring another point concerning global mobilization and support of the Palestinian cause that goes beyond what was achieved before concerning the international opinion?
It is with a heavy heart that I say, strikes will not save the Palestinian people. Strikes, wherever they are in the world, will not end the mass murder of Palestinian men, women and children. The West is a political, economic, military and cultural juggernaut which has billions, trillions of dollars at its disposal. The West, therefore, can simply ignore protests, even if the protests involve tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of people around the world. The West can easily sideline protests. One way that the Palestinian people can be saved is through the Western ruling elites falling from power and replaced in America or Canada or Britain or in Europe by patriotic or nationalist movements, because in such a scenario, Israel would lose the blank check that it receives year in, year out from the Western ruling elites. Or if the Arab world was to unite, and I truly mean unite, then the Western ruling elites would feel the pressure of the Arab people. Then And only then might the Western ruling elites have to place some pressure on Israel to cease the mass murder of the Palestinian people. But other than that, the Palestinian people will continue to be murdered en masse each day, every week, every month, year in, year out. Yes, I am greatly encouraged.
Doctor, what we are talking about is how much the world interacted with the strike, and this is something that we did not see before, because this is very significant and this has a huge importance to the Palestinian cause. Using the strikes is one of the most important ways to express the position concerning the Palestinian cause, and in assessing and in describing Palestine and what it's doing to Gaza. This has many significance concerning protest and standing on the national level, even in the West. Can you give us a comment about this?
Yes, I agree. I am greatly encouraged by how in the last few weeks, ever since Israel began its murderous campaign, not against Hamas, against the Palestinian people, men, women and children, in the last few weeks, millions upon millions of people all across the world have learnt of the horror that the Palestinian people have been enduring since 1948. And that can only be a positive development. More and more awareness is required. And I encourage that, I salute that, and I hope that continues. But again, we must be realistic. That will not defeat the Western ruling elites. That will not end the West's unconditional support to Israel. The Western ruling elites, as I said moments ago, are an almighty juggernaut. Decisive action has to be taken against them. They either fall from power, or the Arab world grows a backbone and comes to the aid of the Palestinian people. Stop referring the matter to the Arab League. Stop talking about...
Marcus, so that we can be realistic, we will go back to our colleague concerning the effect and the impact. We have seen many steps on the national level and the global level to support Palestine. One of them is strike. Can we please tell us about the impact of this? Yes, and in reality, and in parallel with the real front on the streets, we also talk about many virtual steps taken. And one of the most important steps taken around the world happened on Lebanon, for example, and also in Egypt. This means that the reaction, its frequency, and its intensity is similar in many different countries, and this keeps the Palestinian cause in the headlines around the world and in the discussion being discussed around the world. And so this ceases to be a seasonal cause, but the momentum accumulates, and this also embarrasses and reveals the true face of the monstrous Israeli entity and debunks that Israel is a victim, as the West is trying to convey, concerning the strike. And it is affecting more and more. Some are saying that these movements have very limited impact and therefore cannot really affect the capabilities of the big corporations and the giants that dominate international markets. But by numbers and by statistics, we find that the strikes are inflicting heavy damage to companies such as Starbucks, for example, and we have also shown a specimen of these impacts. And we see that Starbucks is one of the companies that was called upon to be boycotted. It is losing $11 million from its market value. We're also talking about Unilever and McDonald's and Starbucks and many other brands and many other companies. even advertising companies on social media, there are huge efforts to boycott these companies. And even to boycott subscriptions. Even official accounts and advertising services were boycotted so that they would not send any money to companies that support the Israelis. And if it weren't for the strike, if the strike was not significant, then we would not have seen countries criminalizing strikes. What's happening with Zara, specifically after what they did with their advertisement, exploiting the pictures of the massacres and the genocide. And because they did not respect the dead, and they published the scandalous pictures that encouraged more activists to boycott Zara. The more important thing about this, Ramya, is that the consumer becomes an influencer and an effective factor in this, and that the decisive action does not stay exclusive to companies. Some of the ideas of influence is the kufiyya, because this kufiyya has been used significantly. There are universities in Australia, and there are calls to wear the kufiyya in graduation ceremonies in order to send messages that emphasize the students' and the families' steadfast position on the Palestinian cause, and to showcase any kind of form of solidarity with the Palestinian cause despite all the sanctions that can be imposed. In the same context, we can also talk about the Spanish city Greca, that its owners and its students and staff express solidarity, and this is significant. This is significant because the city was bombarded by the Nazis. This is also a very symbolic point that should be expressed. And allow me here, our colleague, to move on. Dr. Marcus, when we talk about these headlines, economy is one of the most important factors, and boycotting the economy is important. We have started to see the expansion of the boycott and its economic impact, and here maybe the political elite and the ruling elite in the West might be concerned by the boycott and the impact that it can have on the economy and the financial system.
Again, I have to disagree. The West controls the global banking sector. The West controls the global financial sector. In essence, the money which is made in all four corners of the world is determined and is controlled by the Western ruling elites. We're not talking about a few $1 million or a few £1 million. We are talking about tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars. We're talking about, indeed, trillions of dollars. The fact that some shops, clothes shops and coffee shops are losing money is meaningless to the Western ruling elites. Again, I wish that strikes would have a very powerful impact on the Western ruling elites. I wish that the strikes would relieve the Palestinian people of the genocide which they are experiencing. But we have to be realistic. The Western ruling elites care nothing for democracy. They care nothing for public opinion. Yes, it is true. Growing awareness of the horrors which the Israelis inflict on the Palestinian people is a problem for the Western ruling elites, but only in the context of the illusion that the West has created about itself, that it is the guardian of democracy, freedom, rule of law, and human rights. That is a problem. There's no question about it. And strikes...
We need also to discuss this point, because we must also recognize the concepts that we are talking about, meaning that the West has worked for tens of years in order to create a picture to create an image among the Westerners that is opposite to the image that has now been created among the Western public opinion. Among them is the United Kingdom, because in 2010, there was a paper in Israel about how we can win the public opinion, and the United Kingdom was put one of the main actors that can influence the decision for foreign policy. So, concerning what has been done for the image of Israel, this has been struck down, specifically among the youth. This has an impact.
Yes, it does have an impact, but in practice, will it alter Britain's relationship with Israel? Will it end Britain's strategic partnership with Israel? No, it won't. The British ruling elite care nothing for democracy. They care nothing for British public opinion. Let me give you an example. The overwhelming majority of the British people are opposed to how Britain has been flooded with immigrants. They are opposed to how multiculturalism has been imposed on the British people. And they have been very vocal about that. Does the British ruling elite care about that? No, they don't. They continue to flood Britain with immigrants because they have plans for those immigrants. So the point I'm making is this. You can keep on exposing the lies of the British ruling elite or the Western ruling elites in general. You can keep on exposing their criminal, murderous nature. But that alone will not stop them. That alone will not end their relationship with Israel.
And maybe these terms, these names, these descriptions are now starting to gain traction, because this is what you want to talk about with our colleague. Israel cannot anymore bear the idea of containing this image of Israel. And in this video, this is what Francesca Albanese said concerning the occupied Palestinian lands, in addition to the president of the New York Times office in the Middle East concerning genocide.
A month ago, you said there was a risk of genocide in Gaza. It's a very strong word to use. Do you still stand by it?
It is a very strong word, and I've used it 3 times with dozens other special rapporteurs of the United Nations, raising the risk of genocide, the serious risk of genocide, and then referring to the fact that we might see a genocide unfolding when the victims were half of what they are today. Look, there is the risk of genocide. We are not a judicial body, so it's not up to us to make conclusions. But when there is the risk of atrocities being committed, there is an obligation of the international community, of UN member states, to intervene and stop the operations, and this is not happening.
Israel's goal is to erase not only a people, but the idea of Palestine. It is a carbon copy of the massive campaigns of racialized slaughter by other settler colonial projects that believe that indiscriminate and wholesale violence could make the aspirations of an oppressed people whose land they stole go away. And like other perpetrators of genocide, Israel intends to keep it hidden, locking out foreign reporters and photographers, cutting phone and internet service. And it has targeted Palestinian reporters, my colleagues, for assassination, killing over 50.
We are talking here about the sensitivity of some terms and how impactful they can be. And this in itself created controversy. So much so that some people said, how can genocide be withdrawn from usage? Yes, they want to cancel the usage of the term genocide. And of course this is understandable for the Israelis, because this renders the advertising and war machine of Israel useless. Why? Because it puts the killing machine, in addition to the support that it gets from the United States, on the expense of the people. And of course this has many legal repercussions if we were in an international community that does take into consideration what is happening in Palestine. But we will see, why are they trying to remove the term genocide, and how are they trying to influence Western media and Western press by this. In Wall Street Journal, they're talking about it is time to retire the term genocide, and they are also citing many examples and many incidents, not what's happening only in Gaza. This also harbored a lot of reaction and attention. Yes, the activists want to obtain interpretations and justifications for trying to retire this term. And why at this time? In the essence of this paper, we can say that to eliminate an entire group, an entire ethnicity, through a specific methodology is characterized as genocide, but the Western media does not want to use this term. Rather, the Western media wants to justify why they are not calling what is happening in Gaza a genocide. These are some of the reasons that this website wants to show the readers and present to the journalists in order to urge them to retire the term genocide and to justify what is happening in Gaza, to provide many different reasons and causes for that. In practice, Ramya, this was not unaddressed. The Economist itself believes that what is happening in Gaza is not a genocide, and they are explaining how this term was misused in order to talk about the issue in Gaza specific. On the other hand, if we see what the activists and the users are using, what terms they're using to search for the genocide happening in Gaza, and if they are really emphasizing on the term genocide, we are going to do this research on TikTok. In the last 100 days, we will search the term genocide. Among the suggestions that we see genocide Gaza and genocide for the people of Gaza. And when we search for it, we see a lot of terms that were used to post, to publish, and to create content and videos talking about genocide. This is ever increasing as we are seeing together. It creates a trend. That is why this term was. That is why they're trying to retire this term. I'm also going to try to search TikTok to see what I can get, and what can companies get when they search the word, for example, genocide again. You can see the number of viewers and reactions. We're talking about 980 million views for content associated with genocide. And genocide is always associated with Palestine, West Bank, and Gaza. I will conclude with this search so that we can have a clear picture. We are going to try to search on Google to see if the results are the same and if there are causes that drive the Western media to retire the term. We try to search attack, genocide, war, Palestine, and Hamas. The word genocide is the least used when we talk about Western media posts over the last 2 months, slightly a slightly higher result is the word attack. But most of the media uses the term war to describe the conflict and to try to equalize the two parties and to consider what is happening as war. And the highest is Hamas, of course, to associate what is happening with what Hamas did and reacting to Hamas. But this is what's happening in progression. Genocide is always at the bottom. It is the least used term by the Western media. Of course, there is a censorship attempt to replace this term with other terminology in order to paint an image that they wish. Dr. Marcus, why is the word genocide sensitive as we see it now?
First of all, we must be absolutely clear with what the word genocide means. Because over the last 3 decades, the West has politicised and deliberately misused the word genocide in pursuit of geo-strategic objectives. So, the West deliberately misused the word genocide in the former Yugoslavia, in Libya and in Syria, and they are now doing so in Ukraine. So, the word genocide means the systematic murder of an entire people based on either ethnicity or religion. On that basis, there is a compelling case against the Israeli state for having continuing to commit genocide against the Palestinian people, because the Israeli military is not only killing Palestinian men, they are murdering Palestinian women, they are murdering Palestinian children, and they are murdering Palestinian elderly people. Indeed, 23,000 Palestinian women, civilians, have been murdered thus far in the last few weeks. Of that, 9,000 Palestinian children have been murdered. That is why I say there is a compelling case against the Israeli government, and in my opinion, the case is simply irrefutable. Now, why is that a problem for the Western ruling elites? Well, this, unlike for strikes, is a serious problem for the Western ruling elites, because the West cannot be seen by its own people to be allied to a country which is committing genocide. To be accused of genocide is a potent, lethal charge which can decimate a country's image, reputation, credibility. So the Western ruling elites have employed their tech giants such as Google, YouTube and whatnot, and of course Western mainstream media to deny any allegation that the Israelis are committing genocide against the Palestinian people. Because if the case is made,
we can say that there is an impact on the Western elite concerning some important details, such as using the term genocide, and here we are talking about a genocide that is credible and that is true in the Gaza Strip. Doctor, can we go back to the source of reaction with our colleague Dr. Hiba? So Hiba, this is concerned with what happened in the universities in the United States, and this was very significant, and it even affected the presidents and the chairs of the universities as they were pressured. So we start from the hearings of MIT and Harvard and Pennsylvania University, and we saw what happened in these hearings and how these turned into investigations. The ramifications of this and the consequences of this were huge, specifically about the people who specifically for the people who participated in the hearings and the students and the movements that accompanied these hearings. Today, we are still hearing about what happened in these hearings. We will start with this video. In this video, students in Harvard University faced the American senator, and genocide was always used. And this is probably the reason why we started off with genocide.
We didn't maintain genocide. We just maintained genocide.
She constantly repeats genocide, and she's talking about a personal experience and how she lost a few members of her family. But what is important is that this was spread, this got viral, and many were controversial about whether the term that was used. A student also enters using a microphone to a lecture room and says to everyone that this is the last 15 minutes of this semester, and he asks them to dedicate some time to defend Palestine. This is not insignificant, because we're talking about prestigious universities and important majors. This has an impact. This has an influence. The lecturer is giving permission to anyone who wants to leave. He's not asking them to listen to him or to give him a chance to express himself. The most important thing today, among the consequences that we want to talk about, is what happened with the director of Harvard, Claudine Gay, that is now being subject to a huge campaign of attacks and criticisms. Today she was accused that the dissertation that she presented is fake, that it was forged, and that it has plagiarism. So there is a defamation campaign against her based on what she said in her testimony in the hearing for the chairs of the universities. There was talk that using the term genocide and other terms, specifically from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, that these terms and these phrases called for the genocide of the Jews. And the majority of what we observed saw that this was out of context, and this is what forced their hand. Concerning the director of Harvard that was accused of plagiarizing her dissertation, it was very interesting to see that many other lecturers that supported Professor Gay, they signed a petition to support her and to stand by her side. On the other hand, we will talk about the figure that was assigned in the place of the chair of the Pennsylvania University because of the pressure that we subjected to. Julie Platt is now appointed as chair of the Pennsylvania University. She is from Kansas State, and she is the daughter of the famous Jewish woman, Joan Shiperen. What's interesting is that she works for the Jewish CAM institution, and she was also chief of the Jewish Union, the Jewish Union for women in Los Angeles, and she also works in the Hillel and the Katz Center for Advanced Jewish Studies. What's interesting is this appeals to the Jewish lobby that controls a large part of the financial system inside America and the decisions in America, and she did not disappoint. On the onset, she gave out a statement, and in this statement, she says that we are now doing the greatest mobilization in supporting Palestine to stand against anti-Semitism and to defend its citizens. So we can see anti-Semitism and Israel's actions are always associated. So this was basically the first test through which she tried to present herself as as someone who is an ally to the Jewish lobby. Mr. Marcus, I want a comment from you about what happened in the American universities and concerning this replacement of for example, this person that was assigned instead of Miss Megan in the Pennsylvania University.
I believe your audience should know, assuming of course they already do not know, that universities in the Western world, America, Canada, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, are utterly discredited. They are no longer respected. And one of the main reasons is this: Western universities are one of the main organs of woke ideology. Lecturers and students across Western universities promote the claim that a woman can have a penis, a man can become pregnant, and a man can menstruate. So whatever is happening at Western universities vis-a-vis the murder of the Palestinian people really has no bearing amongst ordinary people in the Western world, because the ordinary Western man and woman has neither the time nor the day for Western universities. But what is important is that more and more ordinary people in the Western world, not students, university students, they're discredited, ordinary men and women in the Western world are becoming aware that Israel is not this innocent country that the Western ruling elites have been telling them for decades. They are now seeing with their own eyes, because of social media, that Israel is carrying out mass murder against the Palestinian people. They have seen for themselves that 9,000 Palestinian children have been murdered, and therein lies a threat to the Western ruling elites. Not enough to end the support for Israel from the Western ruling elites, but it is a real source of problem. That is why the Western ruling elites have unleashed their media against anyone who says that Israel is committing genocide. As I said, that is a threat to the West. The West cannot be seen to be allied with a country that is committing genocide, even though, of course, Britain, for example, has committed the most genocides in human history. They committed the Irish genocide, the Native American genocide, the Indian genocide, the Aboriginal genocide, and so on and so on. And Britain was the first countries to establish concentration camps during the Anglo-Boer Wars, in which 30,000 Boer men, women and children were imprisoned and died horrific deaths. But even though more and more people in Britain and the Western world are becoming aware of Britain and America's checkered history, that won't defeat the West.
The images of prisons and concentration camps against the Aborigines, and there were many conferences, there were many associations and relations between ISIS and Israel, and what Israel did to a lot of Palestinians as they stripped Palestinian men and took them to prisons. And now we move on to you. This was significant, and there are many who are angry against these images that we saw, specifically in the West. Because many in Gaza were humiliated. We will start by talking about people who support Israel, who made things worse. Netanyahu's consultant is now posted about being held accountable for these images.
What was the purpose of the exercise that was going on at that point in that part of Gaza?
First of all, remember it's the Middle East and it's warmer here, and especially during the day when it's sunny, it's to be asked to take off your shirt might not be pleasant, but it's not the end of the world.
The fact that some of those who were taken in that particular incident have now been released suggests that they were not members of Hamas, and whilst you're entitled to round people up in that manner, what the IDF is not entitled to do under the Geneva Convention has breached the third convention, which you did, didn't you, when you filmed them in those positions?
So once again, I don't think we're talking about formal material that was released, and we have to look at how the video did.
If it proves to have been filmed by the IDF, that's neither here nor there. Neither is the temperature in the Middle East.
I understand. But I think the important thing here is to remember these are military-aged men who were arrested in a combat zone. And as you've reported, people have already been released. We have no intention of keeping innocent people in custody.
Which I agree with, and I'm sorry to press you on this point, but if people have been released because they are not members of Hamas, if this was filmed by the IDF, it is a clear breach of the Geneva Convention, is it not?
So once again, we have to look into where the video came from. It's not official video that was released by the State of Israel.
If it were filmed by the IDF, as I just said, it would be a breach of the Geneva Convention, would it not?
So I'm not familiar with that level of international law. I know in the past prisoners of war have been filmed. Often that's good because families can identify people. But as it is a breach or not, I'll have to check with my legal department.
When he was cornered with this many questions, he does not have any justification or any answers to provide. We know practically that he will not have any answers because this is a fabricated entity. He will always say, and this material was fabricated. We will now see how the reaction was to some fabricated material because there is no symmetry, there is no credibility to the videos. And even the pictures that were posted do not hold any credibility. This was the main picture that we want to be addressed because we see that this man holds the weapon in the first picture using his right hand and then in his left hand in the second video. It is as though that the director wanted to reshoot this video before it was published. It is interesting that they were stripped down so that to ensure that they are not a threat, and then they were given their weapons so that they can shoot their video. There are many questions about this concerning stripping them, giving them the weapons again, and then reaching the last material associated with the Israeli confessions that these people are in fact civilians. This was evident when they were released because of that. This is a very important scene even in Israel. People said that this was not very helpful for the image of Israel. So here I want your comment, Mr. Marcos.
What we should be aware of is that the West, sometimes explicitly, sometimes not so explicitly, presents the Palestinian people, in particular Palestinian men, as at best semi-human and at worst subhuman. And of course, the Israelis present the Palestinian people, especially Palestinian men, in the exact same way. So by the Israelis parading Palestinian men, either naked or semi-naked, in that fashion, is corresponding to the image which has been presented to Western publics and to the Israeli public concerning the Palestinian people. That is a horrific and unforgivable reality. But we are witnessing a brutal media and information war against the Palestinian people. And because of social media, many holes are being punched in the West's and Israel's propaganda machine. And that is very important because that is something, for example, we did not have in the 1990s during the Yugoslav civil wars. But fortunately, we have that today. But as I said, the parading of Palestinian men like that is for a reason. It is to tell ordinary people in the Western world who are ignorant of the Middle East that that Palestinian men are at best semi-human and are at worst subhuman. Therefore, we have every right to do what we are doing against them. We even have Western politicians saying now that Israel, that it could be legal for Israel to attack refugee camps. Think about that. It could be legal for Israel to attack refugee camps. They are only saying that now because they are aware that there is an image of Palestinian men in the Western world, that they are, in essence, savages. Therefore, the Israelis are not killing, they're not humiliating human beings, they are killing and humiliating savages.
Interrupting you because we don't have enough time. This would have an opposite direction, an opposite effect for Israel, because it was not able to capture any armed men. We are out of time. So thank you so much, Mr. Marcus, the international affairs expert.